So the number one question that I get asked by people in all of my comment sections of all of my sim videos is, what control setup do I use? Do I use a HOTAS? Do I use a keyboard and mouse? Do I use a controller? What do I use? Like, do I use head tracking, whatever? Um, I've promised to make a video like this for a very long time. I think over a year ago I promised I would make one soon, and it just never really happened. But today we're gonna do it. I'm not gonna go too in depth with some of the controls because there's a lot of stuff, especially when it comes to like the smart weaponry, where I'm not 100% happy with the way I have it set up. There's a lot of like overlap and stuff like that. But I'm going to show you anyway because it does work, and you can sort of just copy it on if you're on console and you can't download the BLK file. This video is for you, so you can just kind of copy it off. If you're on PC and you're interested in downloading, in the description you'll see a link to our Discord server, and in that server we'll have a channel for control setups, so you can just go there and just download whatever you want. But yeah, before we get into it, I just want to say real quick, so I use a combination of an Xbox Elite controller, so that's the one with the pad, it has like paddles at the bottom, and a chat pad. A chat pad is basically this like little keyboard thing that you can buy for like $30 or whatever, and it plugs into the bottom of your controller, and you can actually, like, a War Thunder actually allows you to assign buttons to it. Now obviously this works on PC, but if you're on console, you can actually assign keybinds to that keyboard. So it's just like a little pad that you plug into the bottom, and you get an extra bunch of buttons to bind for the game, which is really helpful. I'm not sure if PlayStation has anything like this. If it does, please let me know in the comment section, or let the people know in the comment section. But yeah, so you can definitely do this. If you do not want to buy a chat pad because $30 is too much, you can just get like a regular USB keyboard and plug it into your console and assign buttons to that as well. That does work as well. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to come over here to common controls, and then you want to scroll all the way down to view controls here, and you want to set your zoom camera up here. So if you can see, I have my left stick click in is zoom, left stick down plus click in is also zoom. This basically is just, it's done because if you just click the left stick in, Warfun's going to recognize, okay, it's going to zoom the camera when you click the left stick in. However, when you move the left stick to a like to the left, for instance, or something, and then click it in, that's a different like War Thunder sees that as a different input, right? So you kind of have to, I've put one input here, like left stick down and click in, so that if I'm actually pulling up with my aircraft, because I use this to control my aircraft as well, it will still zoom in. So that's why this is kind of important, and we'll get to that. There's a few other controls like that as well that we'll get to later. Then you kind of just want to play around with these sensitivities as well. This is kind of what works for me. The camera smoothness I would say is very important. I just have it at 100%, and the sensitivity in zoom as well is very useful as well. So once you've done that, you come over here to aircraft. You make sure you're in full real controls. And by the way, this control setup does not cover helicopters, ground vehicles, or naval or anything like that. So I just don't play any of those things. So this is just purely aircraft. So first up, so we start at the top. Control mode none, visual instructor obviously just keep off. Toggle SAS mode. This is very important if you're playing jets, like top tier stuff. You'll see what it is once you bind the button for it. I have it on a left trigger and Y. So you press those two buttons, and then you'll toggle the SAS mode. View and battle air Y-axis. That's the mouse wheel. It's not important actually, so I don't use the mouse while I play. Throttle axis, we'll just go here. So this is the right thumbstick, up, down. And you can just copy all of these values. It's very important actually for the throttle axis that you have a dead zone in there as well, because you also use this as your rudder axis. And the last thing you want is when you're sort of trying to control the rudder, it's gonna like adjust the throttle or whatever. It gets quite annoying. So that's one thing you want to do. Hold throttle for WEP no. So you want to have that turned off, so you don't have to hold the throttle down for WEP, because that thing gets really annoying as well. Here we have non-linearity to 2.5. Left stick, this is just, it's pretty simple stuff here. I don't think I need to explain much here. Pitch axis is kind of a similar thing. I have non-linearity set to 1 because I don't particularly like the non-linearity on the pitch axis, but yeah, left stick, up, down, basically the vertical axis on the left stick. Then we have for the yaw axis, this is going to be the right stick, left, right, obviously, and you can just copy these settings over. So then once we get to roll sensitivity, 100%. The pitch sensitivity I like to have down at 0, just because I think if you do play on a controller, this just makes it that much easier to sort of to point the plane where you kind of want it to and hit those kind of shots. I think this just really helps when you're playing stuff like props as well. You can have, like, some people like to have this up at like 30% or whatever. You know, you just, I would honestly just recommend experiment around with it. But the default I do believe is 100%, and it is quite twitchy at that. But I like it at 0. Your sensitivity is kind of a similar thing. I just like having it at like 40. That's kind of what I just settled on. Frost vector control. So this is for planes like the Harrier and the Yak 141. Basically, you press enable axis, which is the X button, or it would be a square on PlayStation, and then you just kind of copy these settings over. So it's you hold down the X button with your index finger, and then you can use your thumb to move the right stick around, and you can use that to angle your thrusters. Invert y-axis on yes, because that's just what I like. Force feedback. The controller doesn't have force feedback. That can actually go off as well. There's no point. Wing sweep controls, basically it's the exact same as the thrust vectoring, because there's no planes in the game currently that have thrust vectoring and wing sweep control, so you can just have that set to the same button. Switch wing sweep controls. So this is, I didn't mean to do that. So this is basically to switch planes that have like the variable wing geometry, so stuff like the F-14, the F-111, the MiG-23, to toggle between, you know, manual mode and whatever, and that's basically those two buttons there. Flaps down, very simple, D-pad down. Flaps up, D-pad up. Toggle air brake, this is on the right stick. This is similar to what I talked about earlier. So if I just click in the right stick, that's going to deploy my air brake. However, if I'm moving the right stick around and then click it in, it's not going to register, so I have to add right stick to the right and click, right stick to the left and click. The reason I don't have right stick up and down click is just because there's no space. It only lets you sort of go this far. I will come back to this setting later as well, so just keep that in mind. Thrust reversal is just very simple. X, I think it's only the Vigan and the Tornado that have this feature. On the Tornado, you need to be a little bit careful, because if you're using the wing sweep control, you're actually going to put the plane in thrust reversal mode, so you kind of have to play around that a little bit. I think like one of the Swedish jets, I think it's the Saab 105 or something, has thrust reversal as well, but it's not a lot of planes that have it. Toggle landing gear, A and X, very simple, or G on the keyboard if you have the chat pad. Left brake and right brake is on LT as well. This basically allows you to use the thrust reverser along with the wheel brakes at the same time. Drag shoot, just very simple, X. Small caliber guns and stuff, you don't need any of this. You just need fire primary weapon and fire secondary weapon. So fire primary weapon is obviously going to be the right trigger. A fire secondary weapon is going to be the right bumper. Now, primary weapons are always going to be your machine guns, your cannons, right? Like the guns that you have on the plane, right? And then secondary weapons are going to be stuff like missiles, bombs, and rockets and stuff like that. So that's going to be on the right bumper. Jettison secondary weapon I've got on R and open Bombay on B, so these are like keyboard buttons, but you don't, this isn't like very strictly, if you're very, very strapped for buttons, you don't necessarily need these two. Fire drop bomb series and fire rocket salvo are just both triggers held together, so this is just gonna, instead of dropping one bomb or firing one rocket, you fire off like all of them at the same time kind of thing, or one after the other. Then we have drop additional fuel tank is on T, yes, so if you have external fuel tanks, that's going to be the button to drop them. The weapon lock air to air is going to be the B button, or circle on PlayStation. I don't think I need to tell you this. Weapon lock air to ground is also B, lock guided bombs is also B, so this is just kind of like if you have like a guided weapon, this is going to be your lock button. Switch primary weapons is Y, so this is, so a lot of props have this where they have machine guns and cannons. So what you can do is if you press Y, it's basically going to select either machine guns or the cannons, and then you can cycle through it as well. So you can actually have them, you can fire machine guns and cannons at the same time. It is actually quite useful for like conserving ammo in certain props, but in jets you don't really need this. Switch secondary weapons is going to be A, so this is obviously going to be switching between your bombs, your different types of missiles and stuff like that. Fire countermeasures is going to be right on the D-pad. So if you have an Elite controller or a controller with paddles, you can leave it the way it is right now, because I have my right on the D-pad is on one of my paddles, so I can actually reach it whilst I still have both of my thumbs on the sticks. So however, if you have a regular controller, I would recommend swapping this around left on the D-pad with, where is it, with the air brake. So your air brake's going to be left on the D-pad, and your flare button is going to be on the right stick, because it's just because you at top tier especially, you need to flare so much more now. You need to have the flare button in an ergonomic position, in an easy to reach place, right? So I recommend doing that if you do not have a controller with paddles. Then we get the periodic countermeasure. You don't really need this. Your axis for aim weapons, pitch axis for aim weapons. So this is stuff like I think like the bullpup rocket, like wire guided rockets. You fire them off and then you have to like sort of manually steer them in. It's very simple. You just hold the X button and then you use the right thumbstick to sort of control it. And it's the same for this as well. Just obviously it's the other axis. Then we have toggle laser designator is going to be the left bumper and Y. All of the radar controls are basically keyboard binds, or most of the radar controls are basically keyboard binds, except for the switch between radar and IRST. That's going to be on X, and lock radar target is going to be on Y, just because they're very easy to reach buttons. You can try sort of putting one or two of these, like trying to fit them onto the controller as well if you don't have a chat pad, but it is very, very difficult, and I haven't really necessarily found a way to do it yet. So if you do have a way, let me know. But these are basically these are like the only buttons that you do kind of need for jets that don't actually fit on my control setup, on the actual controller, I should say. Everything else is pretty ergonomic. Everything else that's on the keyboard or on the chat pad is something that it's like little miscellaneous things, like little camera controls or the landing gear or stuff like that. So the radar controls are the only ones where you really need to sort of find a good place for them. And on the chat pad, I have them like on 8, 9, and 0, just because they're like sort of on the edge. And then I have them on 0, 1, and 2 as well. Sorry, 1, 2, and 3. Because they're on the other side. It's just easy for my thumbs to reach it. But if you're using on the keyboard, you may want to have these in different positions depending on. I hope it, like, you understand what I'm saying with this. Radar lock target. So this is basically, or select radar target. This basically, you hit this button and it selects what target the radar's sort of looking at, so you can switch between targets we're using this button here. It's also the same button that you use for the radar queuing system. So if you use I think, where is it actually? I think it's in controls. So if we go over here to, sorry, in options, you go to air battle settings, and it's target cyclic switching of aircraft radar. So what this does, if you turn this off, is you don't switch between your target. You have like a little cursor on the screen, and actually I can show you. I think I have it right here. So you see the radar on the right. This is basically what that does. You get like a little cursor on the screen and you can just move it around like that. It's very simple. But you don't, if you're still new to Sim, then I would just recommend just leaving that the way it is, and you just hit the up on the D-pad to switch between targets. Now, up on the D-pad is also the same button that retracts your flaps, but it works quite well because there's a lot of situations where you need to sort of select different targets on the radar and have your flaps down at the same time, so it just works out quite well. Now, where was I? Yeah, okay, so horizontal radar queuing, actually, yeah, so this is just the axis for the little cursor thing. You can just copy the settings off that, and it's the same for the other as well, just with the other axis, of course. Radar tilt control axis, so yeah, I mean, this is another thing. You can actually tilt the radar up and down, but this only works if you have a certain setting enabled as well in the options, which is I think it's enable constant elevation of radar antenna. If you turn that off, it allows you to tilt the radar up and down, but it comes with a horrible gyro that you can't turn off, so I have it turned off in general. And switch sight mode in cockpit is Q. This is important if like if you're bombing or something like that, you need a ballistic computer. Activate target point is the same button as toggle laser designator, left bumper, and Y. Deactivate target point as some keyboard buttons, and sight stabilization is left bumper and X. So these are like for smart bombs, Mavericks, stuff like that. Air to ground weaponry. Gunner aiming, axis control. I mean, this is just like if you fly bombers or whatever, you just use the right stick to to aim your gunners and stuff. It's pretty self-explanatory. These are just the sensitivities that I like. And then toggle view is going to be left on the D-pad. I know in Sim you only get the cockpit view, but sometimes you're flying, a bomber, for instance, or something with a targeting pod, or with Mavericks or something, where you need to sort of go into a different camera mode in order to use those weapons, and this is the button for that. But you can also, if you have a keyboard, you can also just switch that to one of the keyboard buttons and maybe have like a radar control bound to left on the D-pad if you want. That's something that you can, you can switch around. You can decide for yourself how important that is for you. Zoom axis here is going to be, so this is not the button on the left stick that just zooms in to your target. This is going to be something different. So you can see the settings that I have here, and what this allows you to do is basically allows you to sort of do that, but you can see I don't have to go all the way. I can just kind of inch my way forward and sort of just decide where I want the camera to sort of sit in the cockpit, right? So that's what that button is. And then when I use the left on, when I click the left stick in, that's just the overall zoom in option, right? So this is essentially this is your FOV slider, these buttons, right? That's what it is. Then we have view in battle. X-axis is obviously just to move your head around, look around or whatever. Right thumbstick and these controls here. So yeah, I have to hold down LB in order for it to work. And then obviously here it's the same, just with the other axis as well. Hold down LB and then you can move the camera. And then if you hold down LB as well, that then relieves the right stick of having to control the throttle and the rudder, so you can freely move around the right stick to move your camera around. And then once you let go of LB, then the right stick becomes your throttle and rudder again. So you can't move your camera and control your throttle and rudder at the same time, not on my control setup, but it works better than it sounds, and I think it works quite well as well. Oh, sorry, one important thing to notice here is I have relative control turned off, so that means basically if I'll show you actually if so you can see I'm using the rudder now. You can see my feet move, and if I hold down LB, it allows me to look around. And now if I'm holding the stick in the up position now, up to the right, and if I let go, it puts it back into the forward position. So I don't have to like manually put the camera back forwards. And obviously if I keep the stick here and let go of LB, it does the same thing, but it now increases the throttle and stuff like that. Then we have head movement forward backwards. You don't necessarily need this, but what this does is it's not an FOV slider. Again, I'll show you. It's just this little sort of, where is it? There we go. You can just, hang on, let me just put back to the defaults. And so what this does is it allows you to sort of just move the your pilot's head back and forwards, right? That's essentially what it is. So I always have the FOV zoomed all the way out and then the seat all the way forwards, kind of. That's just how I like things. Next thing here is the head movement up and down. So I have a lot of people actually ask me about this. How do I move my head up and down? And this is basically, I've just bound to my left trigger. So you get like a nice little smooth, again, I'll show you. You get a nice little smooth up and down movement or whatever, and it's quite it helps out quite a lot. And this is, I think, why people, if I use the right stick, the camera movement along with the head movement up and down on the left trigger, it sometimes, I guess, it can kind of look like I have track IR, and I think this is kind of why people think I use a head tracker sometimes. But you can get some pretty good like smooth movements with this. Obviously it's not about how smooth the movement is. This allows you to just look over the nose, so you can kind of lead your shot a little bit more. This actually helps in props quite a lot. And there's another trick you can do as well. Look how low I'm sitting in the F-16 cockpit right now, and I think I always thought this looks a little bit weird for the F-16, just because of like, the actual like green display isn't quite in the middle of the glass there. But a nice little trick you can do is if you go to the correction down here and you put this up to like, I don't know, 20%, that's what I have for the F-16, and then go back, you see I sit a lot higher now and I don't actually have to hold the button. The button still works, but it just defaults back down to like this, slightly raised position. It just looks a lot better. So next up here is the head movement left and right, and what this basically does is it's actually a very useful sort of tool that I think not a lot of people are using. So I have it basically set to the same controls as my camera movement left right, except I have the multiplier all the way up. And so you hold down LB and then you use the multiplier. So what I'll do here is I'll show you. If I just slightly move it, you see that the head movement, it's not just turning, but I'm also rolling the head to the side. So it's like if I'm looking directly back now, I'm actually kind of looking around the headrest, so I can actually see the back of the aircraft. That's kind of the same here, because if I didn't have this setting enabled, I would just be sitting looking at the back of the headrest. You can't really see past the seat, so that's why I kind of like having that. And it's just having it bound to the same button as the camera movement just means I don't even have to think about it whenever I move the camera, so that's a nice little saying that you can have. Here we have aerobatic smoke, toggle cockpit sight, switch MFD1 mode, stuff you don't really need. Switch HMD indication. This is, I actually had some questions about this in my last video because it was actually on the F16. So what this does is when you hit this key, the helmet mounted display or helmet mounted sight or whatever basically appears on the camera whenever you look to the side or whatever like that without having to spool up a missile. Just in case you were wondering, that's what that is. I like having it on, but you know, you do you, I guess. Switch night vision mode. It's just, you know, left trigger and X. Hydroplane, radial, manual, yeah. Trims, elevation trim axis is obviously holding down the A button and using the D-pad up and down. I'm going to show you here, this is what this actually is. So it's very important to, you want to be in relative control. And then the relative control sensitivity is actually not that important for a button. But you want the relative control step at 1%. So what this does is if you hit the button once, your trim is going to move 1%. If you had this this set to 2% and you hit the button once, the trim will move 2%. But obviously, because trimming is kind of a fine little thing that you want to have this on 1% basically. Rudder trim axis you can also add as well if you like hold down B and then use the left, right, and the D-pad as well instead of holding down A for props. But you don't need it in jet, so I don't have it bound. The toggle engine is E, so you know this is how you turn the engine on, because in sim the engine doesn't automatically start in the airfield. You have to manually turn it on. I think on console actually it turns on when you throttle up. It's only on PC where you actually have to hit the button. And so on console you don't really have to have this bound if you don't want to. And then we have toggle extinguisher. So this is, you know, a couple updates ago we got one of the modifications, which was a fire extinguisher, and it's just, you know, if your plane's on fire, just hit the A button and it should work if you have the modification. I think that's pretty much it. There's a couple of like callouts that I've bound here. Yeah, you know, like decal rotation and stuff like that. This is stuff that I kind of just created one day because I needed to move some stuff in the menus, and so don't pay too much attention to this. You can just kind of make your own thing. Oh, by the way, real quick as well. So the tactical map is going to be the view. I think on the Xbox it's called the view button. I think on PlayStation it's called the select button. It's the button that's next to the pause button, right? That's going to be your tactical map, and then if you hold the tactical map button and left on the D-pad, that is going to show up your statistics and the scoreboard and stuff like that. So I think that pretty much covers it. I hope my control setup helps you get into this game mode a little bit more, because I think one of the main hurdles of this is indeed that, you know, the default controls for War Thunder, at least for this kind of game mode, for controllers and stuff like that, just aren't very good, let's be honest. But you can make very good control setups out of the tools that Gaijin gives you. And I hope this video helped you with that a little bit. Like I said before, if you want to download any of these control files, then you can go to the description. You'll find our Discord server in there. There'll be a channel in that Discord server where you can download a bunch of control files, including this one, and there's some keyboard ones as well. If this is the first time you're coming across one of my videos, then hi, welcome. I make sim content on a weekly basis, and I would happily invite you to check out some of my videos that I made if you're interested in this sort of thing, of course. But other than that, I hope it helped. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll do my very best to answer them, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.